Aloha from the East-West Center in Honolulu, and mahalo to viewers around the world for tuning in to today's Gals with Lay Global webinar, Without Consent. Gals with Lay Global leverages the Center's unique access to the world's policymakers, entrepreneurs, community leaders, and artists, virtually uniting these global forces with Hawaii's women leaders to harness their collective experience, ambition, and passion. Gals with Lay Global is intentionally dynamic and interactive. We will begin with our keynote panel, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. Open space will follow Q&A as an optional opportunity for attendees to meet the speakers at virtual roundtables and participate in an unmoderated and informal dialogue for 10 minutes. Open space is a unique opportunity to engage and network as peers with our esteemed speakers and your fellow attendees. We encourage our audience to participate in and take advantage of the access open space provides. My name is Sarah Lamb, and I am a program coordinator at the East-West Center. It's my pleasure to introduce the activists and advocates who will be discussing reproductive rights and the pervasiveness of gender-based harassment and violence globally, as well as what rights and protections exist on paper versus in practice, and the local and national efforts to expand these rights. Malika Dutt is a multimedia curator, storyteller, and founder of several nonprofits, including Saki for South Asian Women, and Breakthrough, a human rights organization working to create a cultural shift and change the norms that perpetuate gender-based discrimination and violence. Rosanna Issa is currently in her 6th year serving as Executive Director of Sisters in Islam, a non-governmental organization working towards advancing the rights of Muslim women in Malaysia and empowering them to become advocates for change. Glory Malone is an experienced award-winning communications professional. She is also founder of TeenMomNYC.com and co-founder of NoTeenShame.org, initiatives that have challenged and changed the ways in which policy and culture views pregnant and parenting young people. Samita Mukhopadhyay is the former executive editor of Teen Vogue, co-editor of Nasty Women, Feminism, Resistance, and Revolution in Trump's America, author of Outdated, Why Dating is Ruining Your Love Life, and author of the forthcoming book, The Myth of Making It. Rachel Wong has dedicated her career to improving quality of life for others. She currently leads One Shared Future, which creates nurturing space for professional development programs and transformative experiences, and co-leads the Safe Spaces and Workplaces initiative that addresses workplace sexual harassment. And now I'd like to take a moment to share our webinar protocols. Today's keynote panel is on the record, recorded, and will be made available on YouTube for viewing and sharing. Each panelist will speak for up to 6 minutes. Viewers, your microphones and videos are turned off during the keynote. If you are experiencing difficulties with internet connectivity, AirMeet provides a low-definition option at the bottom right of your screen. For the best attendee experience, please connect to AirMeet using the most up-to-date version of a Chrome browser. The webinar is also accessible through AirMeet's mobile app, available to download to any iPhone or Android device. Q&A will take place after panelist remarks. To submit a question using the Q&A function at the right of your screen. In either case, please specify which panelist you wish to answer. If you don't have a question of your own, you can also vote for a question asked by a fellow attendee. Questions with the most votes will be prioritized. Once Q&A concludes, viewers will have the option to meet our speakers by taking a seat at any virtual roundtable of their choosing and participating in an unmoderated and interactive discussion. We encourage you to share the space and your voice. Also, join the conversation on Twitter using #GalsWithLay and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EWC Seminars. Finally, I'm delighted to introduce today's moderator, Ollie Body. Ollie is an award-winning storyteller and social entrepreneur. She founded the social enterprise WA Collective in 2017 to connect people with their own bodies and to Mother Earth through selling ethically made reusable menstrual cups. With that, I'll hand over the program to our moderator to offer brief contextualizing remarks. Ollie?
Thank you, Sarah. Kia ora koutou. Ko Oli Body, taku ingoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, hello. My name is Oli Body, and it really is an honour to be holding this space with you today. As Sarah spoke to, I run a social enterprise that works at the intersection of women's health and sustainability by getting people who are most in need access to sustainable menstrual products. I'm calling in from Golden Bay, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I would like to acknowledge the 3 iwi, or tribes, whose lands I'm speaking from, Ngāti Tama, Ngāti Rāroa, and Te Ati Awa. I'd like us to take a conscious breath to acknowledge the people's lands who we're all on And if you don't know, I invite you to bookmark this for later. And if you don't know, instead, you can honor the earth herself. Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to welcome you and your heart to this space. A deep gratitude for you being with us here today as we discuss this exceptionally important topic: without consent, reproductive rights, and gender-based harassment and violence globally, with some hope woven in there too. A huge thank you and warm welcome to our esteemed speakers who are offering their learning and wisdom with us today. I am so looking forward to hearing from you. By way of an introduction to a topic that we can all relate to personally in some aspect, for much of the world, we have been under patriarchal rule for what is thought to have been around the last 12,000 years. An extraordinary level of brutality towards women and people with uteruses has taken place and continues to. On a global level, we only have to look back as far as last week to the murder of Mahsa Amini in Iran, and a couple of months back to the overturning of Roe versus Wade in the USA, let alone the persecution and harassment that happens in silence each day in our communities. It's becoming increasingly apparent, even in mainstream media, that this is a complex, intersectional, and systemic issue interwoven with racism, ableism, capitalism, and an ideology of domination that is hurting not only women, but us all and the planet. Many of us feel this injustice in our bones. I welcome our panelists spanning multiple continents and areas of expertise speaking to this important topic today. A topic that sadly no one is immune from, and that many of us don't have a privilege of choosing to ignore, and that collectively we must act upon. Some final notices before we get going. I have a trigger warning. There may be mentions of sexual abuse and gender-based harassment and violence within this discourse. So please look after yourself. Your safety within this space is our responsibility, and it's also each of ours individually. If this conversation becomes too much for you right now, there is no shame in stepping away at any time. I know that for me, this conversation elicits some huge emotions which can be difficult to process alone. So reach out to someone you trust and feel safe with. And there are also some members here on the chat that can help where they can too. And remembering as well that Mother Earth and the land can and does hold us too. A reminder that gender justice isn't just something for women, and that the likes of abortions aren't just a woman's issue. It's anyone with a uterus, and that affects us all. And finally, ask questions. We love questions. As Sarah spoke to, you can pop a question in the Q&A box below at any point directed to a panelist at any time. And if you don't have a question, you can upvote your favourites too. So, without further ado, I pass the mic to the first of our epic speakers, whose story on Instagram today I can totally relate to, of being in need of some happy books, despite the challenging ones as well. This is Gloria Malone, Senior Manager, Vital Strategist, and founder of Teen Mum New York City. Over to you, Gloria.
Thank you so much, Ollie. I'm so excited to be here and share some of my thoughts and work with you all. My name is Gloria Malone. I am based in New York City, and I come to the work of gender justice and reproductive rights and justice for a variety of different reasons. I had my daughter when I was 15 years old, just 4 days shy of my 16th birthday. And prior to prior to showing in my pregnancy and, people realizing I was pregnant, I was not a star student, but I was a good student. I got good grades. I went to class. I was involved in extracurricular activities, and the ways in which people's perceptions of me completely shifted after they had realized that I was pregnant and was going to have a child were very jarring for me, to be honest with you. I went from having teachers ask me to stay after class to help them with things to my guidance counselor refusing to help me to apply to colleges because, quote, I wasn't going to go anyways, and she didn't want to waste her time. And so I sat with this for many years. I had my daughter. continued going to school, and all of these things. What really sat with me throughout all of these years was the ways in which people treat young women, period, right? Whether they're pregnant or not, whether they're parenting or not, the ways in which that media and people at large talk about young women, talk to them, and how, despite a lot of the adults in my life knowing the statistic that most unintended teenage pregnancies are from grown men who are having intercourse, that's a nice way to put it, with young people who are underage and father children, right? And then it's me and my peers who are left looked at as if we had done something wrong, as if we were wrong for existing and for someone being predatory towards us. I took this with me throughout my entire motherhood journey and still do, because, again, why was I treated so differently? Simply because I had evidence that I had intercourse, right? And I saw how other mothers were. I always knew that mothers were deeply undervalued in the United States and in society at large, but there's a particular disrespect and disposability that is applied to pregnant and parenting young people. And when we look at the needs of all pregnant and parenting people, they're basically the same, right? My pregnancy, I needed access to a doctor who could help me, carry my pregnancy to term and bring this child into this world in a healthy way. I needed a home that I could go to that would be safe, that is affordable, that is healthy and a safe place to raise my child. And I needed education, not only school education, but education in general about this big shift that was taking place in my life. And if you talk to any other person who's pregnant or parenting, they will share the exact same sentiments. And so I started to look at how young pregnant and parenting people are intentionally kept out of these available services. For example, I had no idea that there was a lactation consultant that I could speak to. I didn't know that you had to learn how to breastfeed. I didn't know that breast milk has to come in for certain people, and just small things like this, because a lot of people came to me and approached me as a pregnant and parenting young person with the need to figure it out on my own because I, quote, did this to myself. And so they were using my pregnancy and my parenting as a punishment. And this was wild to me. This was so angry. I got so angry, and I still get very angry thinking about it, because no one deserves this type of treatment. But when you step back and you look at the landscape of pregnant and parenting people in the United States, this type of treatment is prevalent across the board. And it shows up in things like, our maternal mortality rate in the United States is astronomically high for Black women and Indigenous women in particular. And this is because people do not listen, point blank, do not listen to Black women and Indigenous women when we speak about our needs and our bodies and our health. It also happens because we don't have those safe homes. We don't have those safe environments. Things like environmental justice, air pollution, quality of our homes is directly linked to your gender, your race, your age, and your geography in this country. And so, and I kind of share a little bit of a different sentiment when it comes to Roe v. Wade being overturned, because it is a huge deal. And I don't want to undermine that. But for so many women and people who have uteruses in this country, abortion access it doesn't exist, to put it plainly. It doesn't exist because of financial barriers. It doesn't exist because state by state, sometimes, county to county laws that keep people from accessing the care that they deserve and they need. And so one of the things that I really find hope in is the advocacy of people who are most at the margins, taking lead and creating unique ways that we know are sustainable and healthy and honor all parts of us, so that we're able to access the care that we need and that we're able to be proud and happy with our lives and our choices. And that looks like young women and young parents in California and New Mexico advocating for laws that allowed them to take days off of school so that they could take days off of school and get back, and have and go to these appointments that they have for themselves and their children and still be able to graduate with their classes. It looks like people finding ways to support one another who are looking for abortions outside of what the state or the federal government says, and that work is really a legacy of women and people with uteruses doing this for centuries, well before federal governments decided that they could tell pregnant and parenting people and people in general what they're able to do with their bodies and with pregnancies. So I'm really glad to be here and listen to everyone else's remarks, and I appreciate you for listening to me.
Gloria, thank you so much. Next, I invite, let me see, 1 second, sorry. Next, I would like to invite Malika Dutt, whose ethos around interdependence I feel a real resonance with. She is the founder of Breakthrough in New Delhi, India. Over to you. Thank you, Malika.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. And I just want to begin with all of us sending some big collective love to Gloria. So if we can just take a moment to direct our energy, our love, our witnessing, our presence to Gloria for that incredible presentation and the extraordinary courage that she has demonstrated in her leadership to deal with the shit that patriarchy does to us. So really sending you a huge virtual hug from all of us around the world. We see you, we honor you. And while we're sending love and really stepping into this kind of honoring, I also just want us to take a moment to stand in solidarity with the people of Iran, with the women on the front lines, to really witness and honor this moment where people are on the streets, young women are on the streets fighting for their bodies, their lives, and that's a story that is true for so many different parts of the world right now. In terms of my own journey, I just turned 60 a few months ago, and it's been one of those like those watershed moments where you get into this place of reflection and thinking about really what have you done with your life. And then particularly if you've had a social change orientation and that's what you've done with most of your life, you can really stand on this edge of complete and absolute despair and complete and absolute awe at what we have been able to do, right? And so I live within that paradox constantly around, some days waking up like I just want to crawl into a hole and feel like, what the hell did I do with my life? And at other times turning around and looking at all of us on the screen and thinking, wow, we are amazing. I'm speaking from the island of Manhattan, originally the land of the Lenape people. I am in East Harlem, which is also called El Barrio. And I am not really sure what I want to share with you about reproductive rights and what is happening around the world. My work in India, I created this organization called Breakthrough, which works in the United States and in India. And I'll focus my comments on our work in India, where we really, for me, this whole question of how do we create the culture change necessary to shift the norms that lead to violence and discrimination in the first place became an obsession. I'm a lawyer, community organization. I'd created an organization called Sakhi that worked with battered South Asian women in New York City, been involved in the global women's movement for the articulation of women's rights as human rights, and really just felt like we were in this endless cycle of dealing with the crap that patriarchy meted out, not just to women and girls, but really across the board to everybody. And if you took an intersectional analysis and understood how the many systems that we had created really undermined people on the basis of caste, of class, of sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, gender, I mean, all of it, that we really lived in a system. We live in a system where our bodies, our fodder, are on the line constantly. And so, in the work that we began to do at Breakthrough, we really tried to find the entry points into how to shift the conditions that led to these things in the first place. I mean, you all probably know India has one of the worst sex ratios because female fetuses get aborted at astronomical rates. And that if one is talking about reproductive rights, we're like talking about that sort of as a cornerstone of this much larger set of forms of violence that women experience. So I'll just share one of the things that we're doing right now in India, and that is creating gendered curriculum for schools. Really understanding that so many of these attitudes get created at a very young age. And how do we work with boys and girls and people of all genders to really start transforming the way in which we understand gender and roles? By the time folks are 18, 19, 20 years old, what we found is that the attitudes have already set in around the devaluation of the female body, so that trying to get to interventions or even making things illegal or even having criminal laws around doctors who perform abortions can be really futile, right? So using curriculum in schools, working with boys and girls, working with teachers, working with parents, working with local governance systems was something that we embarked on as a campaign in one of the states that had the worst sex ratios. We studied the impact of our work. We had external evaluators looking at that work, and we found that we actually had started to make a difference in attitudes. And now that work has spread to 5 more states in India. So we're talking about being able to reach hundreds and thousands of young people and the ecosystems around them with these new ways of thinking about how we show up on this planet around gender. We don't know yet what the long-term impact of that will be on things like gender bias sex selection, but we've already started to see things like early marriage, age increasing. We've already started to see young people taking stands in their family and in their communities around wanting to stay in school, supporting each other's rights around a wide variety of things. And so I say that from this place of despair at the continuing violations that we see, the pandemic of gender-based violence around the world, as well as all of us standing up and saying no more. We're just not going to accept this anymore, and really finding creative ways to shift out of the patriarchal systems that we have so long lived under. So I'll just end my comments there, and thank you all for taking the time to listen to me, to listen to all of us this evening.
Thank you so much, Malika, for sharing your words and wisdom. There's so much more there to dive into, which hopefully we'll be able to do in question time. Thank you. So over to our third speaker, Samhita Mukhopadhyay, whose book I am absolutely in love with the title of. She is the former executive editor of Teen Vogue, and she is the co-editor of Nasty Woman, Feminism, Resistance, and Revolution in Trump's America. She is based in New York, USA. Please take it away. Thank you.
Ali, thank you so much. And what an honor to follow Malika, who I know in real life as well, and someone I look up to, and want to echo what everyone else has said about Gloria's comments. Thank you so much for kicking us off with such honest, vulnerability. And I think I overestimated how articulate I can be this late on New York time, so bear with me. But I'm really excited to be here, and this kind of question of reproductive justice has really been at the forefront of a lot of the work I've done for the last 20 years, and specifically how it kind of intersects with young people and the kinds of information that young people have access to, and have been asked today to talk a little bit about kind of, how young people are grappling with this moment. And not as a young person really anymore. I'm firmly middle-aged now, but I have, worked on a lot of platforms where I've dedicated a lot of time and energy and worked with a lot of young writers on how to kind of translate these transnational feminist issues, intersectional feminist issues in a broader way. One of the things that I think, one of the challenges with, developing a really global narrative around reproductive justice and access to reproductive care is that a lot of our language can sometimes be locked up in spaces and feel inaccessible. And then often I think older feminists and older activists may sometimes feel that young people aren't as engaged. But if I learned anything in my time at Teen Vogue, it's that there is a kind of rising and righteous generation of young people that are really invested in these questions of bodily autonomy. And I think that the activism that we're seeing in Iran, that's really led by a lot of young women and a lot of young men, is fundamentally the same question that I think young people are grappling with in the United States right now. And it's a question of bodily autonomy. It's a question of us having ownership over what we do with our bodies and how we kind of have the ability to make those decisions. So, I think that one thing I've really been grappling with as somebody who's kind of worked in the Western context for most of my life, my family is from India, but I was born and raised in New York. And, I consider that the overturn of Roe v. Wade was a really profound political moment and something that I think many of us knew was going to happen, but we didn't know that it would happen so soon. And it still was very hard to digest. But I think a lot of American women and pregnant people are in shock, or people who could be pregnant are in shock by what's happened. And I think the global context really gives us additional information when you consider how, as Gloria so beautifully talked about, in many communities, access had already been restricted. And especially when you consider, like Colombia, where they had the Green Wave and kind of fought to legalize abortion there and actually have quite a bit to teach us in terms of how to take matters into our own hands and to really lead a revolution and build a broad-based movement to reinstate rights and access to abortion. So one thing I've been thinking a lot about is, as somebody who works in this space, I was extremely confused about what was going to happen at the state level, right? When Roe fell, it was really unclear. And the confusion was kind of part of the strategy, right? Part of the strategy on the right is to keep us confused, is to keep us in the dark, is to put fear into medical providers so that they will not want to administer or suggest or offer abortion. And I couldn't stop thinking about how confusing this must be for young people right now. And specifically people who are of age and who are most in need of these resources. And, in a lot of ways, I think the question of reproductive health care and reproductive access is being fought on the bodies of young people. And part of this is because they're often the most vulnerable. They often lack the most access, they lack the most resources. In many states, they can't advocate for themselves. They often are not getting comprehensive sex education. They're not having access to contraception. There are so many strategies to keep young people from knowing the truth about their bodies and knowing the truth about sex and how to express themselves, least of which what a consensual sexual interaction looks like, which I believe reproductive rights is part of the continuum of consent. And to have those rights removed, as the theme of this panel is, without consent. And prior to the overturn of Roe v. Wade, many of the laws at the state level were around young people's access. So parental consent laws, saying that you had to get a note from your parent to be able to go into a clinic, and you had to present it to a judge before you could have access to abortion. I mean, these were all happening in the last 20 years before, as the kind of right was gaining steam, and figuring out how to build this movement to lead to the kind of overturn of Roe. Many of the startling stories that we've kind of been grappling with since the overturn of Roe, that went so fast, since the overturn of Roe, have been also on the bodies of young women who have been forced into situations and predicaments. But in, the last thing I'll leave you with is I recently worked on a big reporting project about colleges in states that are, in states that have passed trigger bans. And we interviewed 61 schools. A young 17-year-old journalist interviewed 61 schools, asking if one of their undergraduate students would need access to abortion, would they pay for them to travel out of state? And not one school could give us a straight answer, which opened up a whole new arena for me of where I think the next battle for reproductive rights is going to be. And that's on the bodies of young people and college students. And this is actually the strategy of the right. They want people to be forced to have children before they want to. But kind of the highlight of this story was realizing how much campus activism is happening and how many young people are taking these matters into their own hands, and they will be fighting.
Thank you so much. There's a whole lot in there and a whole lot more to unpack, very much so. So hopefully we can get more to more of that during the questions. Thank you so much for everything that you do within this space. Our fourth speaker is Rosanna Issa, who's an exceptionally important voice, not only in Malaysia, but globally. She is the Executive Director of Sisters in Islam in Petaling Jaya, Malaysia. Please, over to you, Rosanna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ollie. And good morning and good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. I'm really, really excited and honored to be here, and the words that have been shared so far by Gloria, Samita, and Malika have been truly, truly engaging and also very, very inspiring. So I'm really happy to be hearing, new voices for me doing this similar kind of work, addressing patriarchy and trying to just take things, one step at a time. At the same time, there's just so much to do and so much to address. I'm with a group called Sisters in Islam. We've been around for about 35 years, founded by 8 women, and they've gone on to launch a global movement called Musawa, the Global Movement for Equality and Justice in the Muslim Family. So the work that Sisters in Islam is doing right now is very, very much, at the national level and context. But there's just a lot that we're going through at the moment, just as how all the other speakers have been sharing as well. I'm going to share a PowerPoint so that people can keep up with all the issues. I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like I'm reading out a laundry list of things, but I really appreciate how all the other speakers have kind of homed into the kind of challenges and issues that we're all facing similarly in terms of how do we deal with this whole breaking down and smashing the patriarchy, essentially. So this is Oh, sorry. I will see if I can share my screen. Is it? Here it is. Can you all see it? I'm not getting any. Can someone indicate to me by voice that you
Yes.
can see the screen?
Yes, it's coming through.
Great, fantastic. So this is, just a quick run through of the laundry list that I'm talking about. Last night as I was looking through the latest information on the UNDP Human Development Index and the Global Gender Gap Report, it sounds like we're not doing too badly. I was doing some comparison with our Southeast Asian neighbors, and we're not doing too badly where the HDI and the Gender Development Index is concerned. But I tell you, on the ground, it just gives a different picture of what these numbers are. And really trying to match what these numbers mean, and yet at the same time what people are going through, what young women are going through on the ground, it just doesn't enter my head. So I'm going to be talking now, the issue of child marriage. One of the things that I wanted to dismantle the myth, because a lot of people out there, say things, for example, like, oh, Malaysia is a model Muslim country, that talks about, Islam in a moderate way. I'm telling you, just like, that is not true. Whatever you hear about Malaysia being a moderate Muslim country, it is not. It may be once upon a time, but we're no longer there. We have really, really regressed to very, very conservative and patriarchal interpretations of religion, and it has gotten hold because there's been so much political use of religion over 40 years, but now it has embedded itself in society, and I'm sure that's happening across the world as well. So pervasiveness of child marriage, that's still happening in Malaysia. The youngest, the most recent uproar was actually in 2018, because that was when we had the high media and public attention following the CEDAW UPR reporting, and that was the year as well where there was news of this 11-year-old girl was married to this 40-year-old man in a polygamous marriage, in addition to child marriage. And the difficulties that we also have is, this whole struggle between federal and state laws, because federal laws both still recognize the minimum legal age of marriage for girls at 16 years old, and there are still exceptions then that can be granted by the chief minister at the civil law federal level and the Sharia court judge at the Sharia law state level. And essentially, there really isn't any flaw to the minimum age of marriage. And this is something that we've been struggling to deal with. And so far, there have been states that have increased the minimum age of marriage, but exceptions are still applicable. And what makes it even more frustrating where the numbers are concerned, the statistics department no longer give a breakdown of the range of ages of child marriage. They used to do so, but now they're all reporting it as marriages below 20 years old. So, you're kind of like having to address this issue, in the dark. And of course, the result of the pandemic, I'm sure it's similar across the world, where there's a high dropout of students. And incidentally, the numbers on child marriage also is there. And we are concerned that, we're not seeing numbers that are unrecorded. Additionally, this wasn't, I wanted to share this because female genital mutilation and cutting, is happening in Malaysia. There is a lot of resistance by the authorities saying that we're actually practicing FGMC. They refer to the terms as female circumcision, and they deny the fact that female circumcision is harmful. And it's prevalent because even though there's no national based data, but a 2012 research has shown prevalence of the practice is as high as 93% amongst Malay Muslim communities in Malaysia, and type 1 and 4 is practiced. And what is an even bigger challenge to address is because it is medicalized, as majority of it is done in private clinics. We have been engaging in, focus group discussions, small group discussions with young mothers to be, young fathers to be. And it's so interesting that there's actually the young fathers who are questioning the practice, as opposed to the mothers who are, who would tend to follow accordingly and not question so much the tradition of the practice of female circumcision and FGMC. Violence against women, has basically gone, in really ways that I've never thought I will see it in my life. We've got rape jokes being done by teachers in school. There's this young girl during the time of the pandemic, she challenged her teacher by putting up, it was just incredulous that she had listened to this teacher do a rape joke in class. So she did a TikTok and it spread like wildfire. It was incredulous how this teacher had been able to get away with it. And so she's gone on to do this amazing campaign called hashtag Make School a Safer Place. But, as a result, Ain Husniza had to be, she was challenged by the school. She was put on, like frozen leaf. She was attacked by the netizens, by her fellow students, and then she had to change to another school. And right now, even that teacher is actually taking her to court, and she's challenging that as well. She's an amazing young woman who's really braving it. I mean, she's like the Malala of our context in Malaysia. So another horrible thing that's been happening for many, many years, but came out again during the time of the pandemic, was how period spot checks were taking place in schools, particularly in boarding schools and religious schools as well, where the teachers or wardens or the prefects were checking whether, the girls were really having their periods, because when they said they couldn't pray, it wasn't good enough to take their word for it that they couldn't. They were forced to put out checks. And this is a real serious violation of bodily autonomy and integrity. So, and the government is not addressing it in a serious way. And you can see all the other kinds of violence against women that's happening in Malaysia as well, which I'm sure is also happening, everywhere else. On top of that, moral policing is also quite high. We do have this thing called the Sharia Criminal Offences Enactments in each state, mostly similar in all the states and enforced in different degrees by religious authorities. For offences such as close proximity between unmarried couples. If you're pregnant out of wedlock, that's an indicator that you've had illicit sex, and then illicit sex itself. If you're caught eating in public during the month of Ramadan, and if you're not following a fatwa. And in fact, Sisters in Islam is, we're in our 8th year in court challenging the unconstitutionality of a fatwa issued against us for subscribing to liberalism and religious pluralism. And of course, in terms of the trends on how the LGBTIQ persons in Malaysia, there's very, very highly increased criminalization under the state, under the laws that I just recently talked about. There's increased regulation of freedom of expression, freedom of religion. There's a lot of hateful speech by the public and religious authorities that's going around. And there's also a lot of increased misinformation and stereotypes. And it really is taking a toll on the community, and they are really, really affected and distressed by what's happening to them.
Rosanna, just to jump in there for a second, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could you do a bit of a wrap up soon, please?
All right. Okay, great. Yes.
Thank you.
So essentially, I mean, this is what we're facing for Muslim women in Malaysia. The fact that there's legal framework tensions, parallel legal system, federal versus state laws, lawmaking and judiciary, state religious authorities, and then the fatwa making and the impact on Muslim public overall. And what we are trying to do, it's very, very tough because popular public narratives out there, on women's rights, on human rights overall, is that, it's Western standards imposed, and liberalism is seen as something that's negative. And we're continuing our work as much as we can. And being in this space is kind of awesome because it gives me a lot of hope to have support from other people as well. Thank you very much. And sorry if I've taken more time than I have.
All good. Thank you so much, Rosanna. There is so much in there, and hopefully we can get into this in question time too. And there's certainly a whole lot more work to be done. So thank you for everything that you are doing. So we haven't had any questions through. So, I mean, I have heaps, but I'd really love to hear yours as audience members. So now is the chance. You can pop something in the Q&A box. There really is no daft or wrong question. We're all here to learn. So please do that. And with that, we have our final speaker of today. So Rachel Wong is a woman not only with a powerful story, but of powerful action too. She is co-founder of Safe Spaces and Workplaces Initiative and founder and strategic advisor of One Shared Future in Hawaii, USA. Rachel, go for it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ollie, and thank you to everyone. You know, I'm so honored to be on this panel and in this room with so many insightful, compassionate, and courageous leaders, and not just the panelists. So I want to acknowledge that, and I also want to acknowledge that we've introduced a lot into this space in a short time, and, you know, ranging from violence, reproductive justice, bodily autonomy, you know, gender inequities, and whatnot. And I'm going to be bringing this in locally to where I live in Hawaii, and also making this somewhat personal. And so in the same way that Ollie, you brought this, that you started us off, you know, can we all take a moment to take a deep breath? And we come into our bodies and awareness of the ground on which we sit or we stand, in this shared room in which we've nurtured safe and brave space, and find the commonality that we all share on this earth. And so with that, know that if something does come up, you know, please do what you need to do to find balance, reach out to any of, you know, on the speaker chat, and, you know, we can be present for people. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some slides. My background is in public health and health, so I do use slides. So let me find this real quickly. And I'm going to start by, it's through stories. I mean, stories is how, you know, we connect to each other, and we're all part of a shared story here. So I wanted to start off by just asking people here to reflect about your own story and experience. And think about if you're counted in any of the following. If you yourself have been sexually harassed, if you know someone who has been sexually harassed, or if you've wondered if something that's happened to you or that you observed is actually sexual harassment. And I'm guessing that many of us are part of this story. And so I'm just going to brief, and so sexual harassment, you know, is so often used, you know, we've already brought it up. And I'm focusing here in Hawaii and a very focused area of workplace sexual harassment here in Hawaii. And it takes many forms beyond what we think of, right? We've mentioned some of them already: unwanted sexual attention, sexual coercion, gender-based harassment, you know, whistling, heckling. And in Hawaii, it even includes the unwelcome aloha lei and kiss that is part of local culture, especially if it's appropriate. And so I can share this island slide, you know, instead of a glacier, with others later. What I do want to share is my own story, and like many others, you know, experienced sexual harassment. And in my case, it was in 2014, and when the Me Too movement swept across the country and the world, I woke up one morning in October 2017 compelled to say and do something. And it resulted in several people filing complaints against the then House Speaker and him resigning. And I want to emphasize that it was never about two people, never about a person. It was always came from a deep love for Hawaii and hope for a better future, the future that we're talking about today. And I was somewhat naive. I thought that my role was to open the door for others as Me Too came along. And many of us are from Pacific and Asian countries represented here. And, you know, there's a culture of silence that exists. You know, here we say, no make waves. Don't stick your head up. And so there was silence. People continue to find me, and yet there was silence, and people are still not in a position where they can come forward. And so out of that, a few of us who got together from different sectors, we created an initiative called Safe Spaces in Workplaces. And others have talked about here about smashing the patriarchy and dismantling systems. And what we've decided to do is go within. To go within and engage people and organizations around shared values here of mutual respect, of diversity, of aloha, and shifting culture within. And so it's an initiative that we started back in 2019. And the first thing we did is we did research to find out what's the prevalence of workplace sexual harassment in Hawaii. And just briefly, these are the key findings. Workplace sexual harassment impacts everybody. We found it across gender, across sector, islands, age groups, ethnicities. And the surprising thing, as others were talking about, we want to dismantle myths. When we gave people the examples of what workplace sexual harassment is, 52% of women said they have experienced, of the respondents, 52% of women said they have experienced workplace sexual harassment in Hawaii. 42% of men did. And so this really is, it's like Ali said, abortion is everybody's issue. It's not just women's. Responses to workplace sexual harassment varies. And in the most case, 40% talked to a coworker, or they left their job, or they created a workaround. Only 18% reported to HR, to human resources. And so that's a barrier to standing up and speaking truth and seeking justice and healing in the ways that young people we're hearing are doing. And finally, workplace leadership does make a difference. In organizations where workplace sexual harassment and training, when it's taken seriously, there was lower rates of workplace sexual harassment. It was a difference of 44% to 66%. Where there's training, there was a lower incidence from 72% versus 86%. And so things do make a difference in changing how workplaces behave and what culture is. And so the hope that we share in Hawaii, and I'm sharing all of this to share it broadly with others, to be able to take, replicate, tailor to your own cultures and places, much in the way that we've been sharing our universality, is that our phases were to listen and to learn from others, to conduct the survey, to be able to make the argument that it's not if it happens, it's when it happens. And when it happens, what are you going to do with it? So we engaged CEOs from around the state, executive directors, community leaders, and we said, these are our values. Do you subscribe to it, and will you stand up against workplace sexual harassment? And people said yes, whether it's for their bottom line, whether it's for their reputation, and most times it's because it's the right thing to do. And so what we're doing right now, and we should be finished by the end of this year, is creating video training videos with curricula that we can share and others can use, and it's with local faces, people of color with local examples. And so we're looking forward to sharing that. And that's how we'll be activating. I just want to, as I wrap up here, I just want to say, let's mark this time in history. Let's mark this moment that we're all here together, that we're sharing about, yes, some very dark things, and also how we're all connected across time and space, and how young people are standing up. And as Malika said, they're saying no more. They're drawing a line in the sand. And so that's what really gives me hope. Grace represents, what she is doing in her courageous way. Samhita talked about young people and activism, and Rosanna talked about that young woman, who started Make School a Safer Place. There's so much hope, and let's mark today, especially as we come across next month, the 5th anniversary of the start of the Me Too movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and for that closing remark as well, to really ground into, as well as the grounding at the start that you spoke to. Thank you so much. All right. So everybody, this is the end of our speaking section, and now to move on to some questions, of which I'm starting to get worried I'm going to be the only questioner. So help me out, team. But nevertheless, I have two that I would like to start off with. So let me find, yes. My first one is for you, Malika. And I'd really love to know how to deal with the grief, anger, fear, and sadness that we all feel about these issues, as I see a lot of this, to be honest, coming out as cancel culture or shutting people down, which makes me feel like it's kind of just the patriarchal sort of power over rebranded because it's fear-based. And while saying that, I also know that I can feel super triggered at racist, sexist Uncle Rodney each family gathering. So I guess my question is, can you please share some thoughts on how we can transmute the pain that we feel and communicate better so that we can all heal?
That's such a big question. So, I have, it's not right here, but do you know what the swimming noodles are? Those like long plastic things that you can use in the water that you can float
Yeah.
on. So I have they're really long, but I got one and I cut it in half. So it's about yay big. I don't know if you can even see the size of my hands. It's about that big. And when I get really pissed off and I get really angry, I take that noodle and I beat the crap out of my couch. And I say that because it's really, really important to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, but to do it in a way that you can move that feeling through your body, through your system, before you start reacting to somebody else or taking it out on somebody else, right? When you're able to take your pain, your grief, your rage out in that way, if you don't want to pick up a noodle and beat the crap out of your couch, you can create a playlist. So you can create a playlist of music that really allows you to scream, to cry, to feel what we actually should be feeling, right, around what is going on in this world. And we have a tendency to suppress all of that, to shut our mouths, to keep it bottled in, because we're not taught how to be in relationship with our emotions in a healthy way. So first thing for me is, how do I allow myself to actually allow it to move through my body? Once I've moved it through my body, then I can find a place to center and figure out a response to whatever it is that I'm dealing with. A lot of times when we are in situations where we're getting triggered, our nervous system is just going straight into fight flight mode, right? Which is absolutely normal. I mean, we are human beings. That's how we're made. But when you go into fight flight mode, sometimes you're reacting to something that may have happened to you as a kid. You might be reacting to something that happened to you as a child that has no bearing on what's actually happening in that moment. And if you're not in relationship to your own nervous system responses, you can get really aggressive, or you can shut down, or you can dissociate, you can numb out. All of those things prevent us from really being present to the thing that we're actually trying to address and deal with. So getting emotions out and learning what your go-to fight flight response is to stuff creates some spaciousness for choice. And then the last thing that I'll say is that, I really, after 35, 40 years of doing this work from a human rights lens, have now firmly planted myself in an interconnected lens. This is a world, we are all interconnected to this earth, to each other, to ourselves, to the cosmos. And if we can start orienting ourselves from that place, then how we treat each other, even when we're angry, can shift, can move, can become another way of how we show up.
Thank you so much for sharing those. And I acknowledge that was a very large question that I just plonked on you. So thank you. And I love especially the piece in there about the presence within oneself and coming into that, and also expanding and looking that this whole thing is so much beyond just the vessels of what we're holding in our bodies. So thank you. My final question is for you, Gloria. And first, I'd also really like to honour the courage that you spoke with and the journey that you've been on, because I realise I didn't do that after you spoke. So thank you so much for speaking with the depth that you did about your own personal journey. I really take my hat off to you. So thank you. My question is that when I was researching Roe versus Wade for this topic, I found out that there was a whole bunch of big corporates in the USA which sent significant financial backing to anti-abortion lobbyists and groups. And honestly, that completely shocked me and also kind of didn't surprise me. There was the likes of Google in there, of Walmart, of Coca-Cola. And then there were the likes of Amazon, who supposedly put in place, I believe, some workplace policy to help women and people that needed abortions get them if required, but then also donated almost $1 million to political organizations supporting extremist anti-abortion politicians. My question is, other than a complete overhaul of the broken, racist, patriarchal, colonial, etc. system that we live in, how can we not only get the government out of our wombs, but also get corporate agenda out as well? Sorry, also a large question.
You are coming with the questions tonight. So how do we get corporations out of our wombs? And I'm going to be very honest. I could say a bunch of things here and try to make them make sense, but that's such a large question that I'm having a bit of a little of an issue responding to it in its totality in this moment. The first thing is, I think that personally, corporations of certain sizes should not exist, because they're able to do these things where they corner not only markets and capitalism and all of that stuff, but they also present themselves as both, a savior, the $1 million for a press release, and also people who are taking down the ability of individuals to fully exercise their rights as humans, right? And so corporations shouldn't get so big to where they can not only corner the market of capitalism, but also of human rights and of public policy that affects so many people around the world. And I think one thing that we have to also acknowledge is that a lot of the awful policies that exist within the United States are oftentimes exported to other countries because of the ways in which aid is doled out by the federal government. And so when we have American corporations being able to impact the lives of so many Americans here, and then those type of policies and practices are exported to other parts of the country, that's where we're able to see things like, sorry, I think I don't see her here anymore. That what the speaker from Malaysia was talking about, right? Like the regression of rights and policies and things that allow people to exercise their full humanity. I also think that one thing that we've touched on a little bit is that culture and policy are so tied to one another. And if we are, right, like we think about, so when I say culture, I mean conversations that people are having, there's no mistake that when we're talking about the Me Too movement and people, trans people living their life out loud and things like that, that immediately there is a political and cultural pushback against these communities. And so we need to really look at the culture at which drives policy and allows people in these corporations and in our elected, positions to do whatever they want. And I think that a lot of that stuff, to me, as someone who is very anti-capitalist in many ways, it looks like not letting corporations or people get too big to where they are able to influence the rights of people, not only in one country, but in so many. I'm sorry, that's not like a very, the super answer, but that was a really big question.
Gloria, I think you approached that fantastically. And I think it points to as well that there is no one answer. This whole thing is so systemic, as you spoke to. And I think it's looking at it within that lens of which you really spoke to. So thank you so much for being
No
put on the
problem.
spot with that one and offering your wisdom and insights. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on to audience questions, which we have some. Yay, awesome. So our top voted question, I believe this is directed at you, Rosanna. The question is, what is the reason for the regression in Malaysia, and are there efforts to fight back?
That's a very good question. I think I mentioned earlier on how Islam has been used as a political tool for over 40 years. That is definitely one factor. And then increasingly, there is also, as a result of that, even good policies that we had in terms of education also becomes very, very politicized. So there is a very, nationalistic take on the kinds of language that we're using, that we should only use. And there's also a lot of this, sense of insecurity as well that's been fired up by the politicians that have successfully over the many decades put in this sense of how the Malay community, I mean, we're the majority in Malaysia, but we're the one that's supposedly under siege. And that kind of mentality and that fear and that insecurity is being used over and over again, and then it also has to do with political identity, because in Malaysia, as a Malay, you are Muslims. You are, that's the religion you are born into. And where freedom of religion is concerned, other religions can leave their religion and enter into another religion, or choose not to have a religion. But with those who are born Muslims, you are essentially then having to live under it's a parallel legal systems that we have here. So we have civil law, but where the personal status laws are concerned, we have Sharia laws, which is not so much of an issue. But then, for certain issues, for example, like when it comes to religion and certain, freedom of expressions, then that becomes, very, very highly contentious, because you are not able, you're only able to express one kind of interpretation of Islam that is not open to what's actually within our what do you call this, our tradition, our Islamic legal tradition, where there's diversity of opinion. There is actually different thoughts of school of law, school of thought, and the tradition is actually quite robust in terms of engagement. But that kind of diversity is seen not something as not positive, but something as something that's negative. And so there's also over the years been this bureaucratization of Islam, and so there's only one kind of Islam that is being perpetuated, and any other alternatives, in terms of opinions, thoughts, even though it's academic, they are seen as threats. And even having to deal with interfaith kinds of issues, because rights are affected, even though Muslim laws only apply to Muslims, but non-Muslims are affected as well in certain cases. There really isn't any constructive way for them to obtain their rights, and it's been a very fraught journey for a lot of families undergoing these kinds of trauma. Essentially, that's what it is.
Thank you so much for answering that one in the detail you did, Rosanna. It's certainly a complex issue, and the piece that you touched on as well with political identity really feels like a big topic, not only with you, but globally at present. So thank you. All right. We have time for one question. This question is for Samhita, and it's also out to any panelist if they want to weigh in, which is lovely as well. So this says, although most children are generally taught the concept of permission, which is the same as consent, the two terms do not have equal weight when viewing it through the lens of sexual consent. What are your thoughts about why there is this disconnect? Is it primarily due to societal attitudes towards women, a combination of different factors, or other reasons?
Yeah, I mean, yes. The short answer to that is yes. I'd say that I don't know that consent and permission are necessarily the same thing, right? I think that permission assumes a certain type of power dynamic, right? Like you ask a boss for permission, you ask a parent for permission, somebody who ostensibly has some kind of say or power over you. The reason that often sex positivity advocates and consent advocates use the term consent is supposed to assume a certain amount of level playing field, that we all kind of come to this together and we have a shared agreement, we have a shared understanding, we have a shared experience. But they're like in some contexts, I think could be interchangeable. And I think that the reason that often sexuality is looked at through the lens of permission is this kind of really regressive attitude we have, particularly about kind of like femme and women's sexuality, that it's something that needs to be cajoled. It's something that needs to be locked away. It's something that needs to, you literally need to like permission to access it. A parent is allowed to control, their daughter's kind of sexuality because, there's this assumption of how men will behave if like women are too free, and I think so many of us in so many different cultural contexts have examples of, our mothers telling us to like not walk in the street at night, rather than teaching our boys not to rape at night. And so I think that a lot of that does feed into this really regressive idea of permission to sexuality versus what a consensual and, I think where we are now, which is like enthusiastically consensual sexual relationship.
Thank you so much for detailing that. It certainly is a big one. Thank you. All right, man, I have so many more questions I want to ask. And, this whole space really feels like the tip of an iceberg of so much of a larger conversation. So as we're wrapping up here, before we go into open space, I really encourage us all to go out into our communities and with our friends and family and continue these conversations. And I'm sure you're already all doing that, which is why you're here. And, don't stop, and remember to refuel yourselves as well. That was a question I wanted to ask of how we will do that in this space and not burn out, because got to look after this one too while we're doing this work. Otherwise we can't do it, hey? Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing your wisdom, your guidance, your learnings, your personal journeys with us today. It really has been a pleasure doing this, and my deep respect to you all. I'd like to end with a quote from Audre Lorde, and it's a short one. And it says, "I'm not free while any woman is unfree, even if her shackles are very different from my own." Tēnā koutou. Thank you to all. I'll now pass over to you, Sarah, who will guide us into the open spaces, which I so encourage you all to stay for. It's a super wonderful chance to connect with our speakers more intimately and all they have to share. And perhaps you have things to share too. I'm sure you do, for of course, we're all learners and we're all teachers. Thank you, everyone. This has been a real delight to host this. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Over to you, Sarah.
Mahalo to our viewers for submitting wonderful questions, and to Ollie for those excellent questions, and to our panelists for their thoughtful responses. While we have reached the end of Q&A, I encourage you to continue the discussion during open space. To participate in open space, simply remain online and take a seat at any available roundtable for an unmoderated and interactive discussion amongst peers. The Center would also like to extend a warm mahalo to our moderator, Ollie, and to our keynote panelists, Gloria, Malika, Samita, Rosanna, and Rachel. The Center is honored to host such an esteemed panel. Thank you as well to our partners, Hub Co-working Hawaii, Under My Umbrella, JWI Ecosystem, Blue Startups, ASU Global Futures Lab, We Empower, Pacific Business News, AUW Women United, Domestic Violence Action Center, and the Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Finally, thank you to our viewers for attending this Gals with Lay Global webinar. Check our website for future webinar information, registration, full speaker bios, and YouTube links at www.eastwestcenter.org/galswithlay. We hope today's discussions have left you with a sense of leadership, entrepreneurship, and inspiration. And for those of you who wish to meet with today's panelists and moderator, please remember to remain online and join with the roundtables for open space. Mahalo, and I will see you soon.